Virginia, I appreciate it very much. Yes, and thank you. And I want to thank HData for having me here to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about the FERC Pro and your filing solution, and also the part that I'm really excited about, the Data Hub. But to give you a little bit of background on me, I was at the FERC for 7 years. I was a commissioner there from 2009 to 2013. And during those 7 years, 5 of those years, I was chairman. And I will confess that during that period of time, I worked very hard to try to get FERC to change its database formats and its filing platform. And I'm so happy that finally, some 10 or 12 years later here, they're now finally standing up this Xbrl platform that enables you to use the filing solution to ultimately file FERC reports. But the exciting part is that those FERC reports now, under the Data Hub that HData is standing up, will allow you to do things that I only sort of dreamed about when I was at FERC. I mean, the first part of it is that there really is this aspect of instant peer group comparisons for the financial statements that will now be filed at FERC, a whole array of them, both on the gas and the electric side. And it will really change, I think, the way that that you are working. And I'll tell you that the kind of comparisons that I used to do, that I'm familiar with, and I'm not an accountant, I am an attorney, but worked very closely with accountants in litigating rate cases, for example. And in those rate case litigation activities, one of the things that you're constantly looking at, for example, is comparing ROEs, comparing return on equity, and comparing comparable companies. The Data Hub and the FERC filings will now allow you to pull this information up virtually instantaneously, where otherwise it's a very laborious process to go through and pull that kind of data out. In addition, when I was at FERC, I requested of the FERC accounting staff to continually do peer group analyses. We did analyses on pipelines, for example, and pipeline results of operations and returns on equity and rate-based comparisons. And I'm sure that they cursed me when I asked them to do that kind of work, because it was, days and days and days worth of work that now can be done literally in minutes with the Data Hub solution. So I think it's going to change your workflow. It's going to change your ability to do these kind of comparisons. The second area is, common checks and analyses that you might perform on FERC financial statements. I know that accountants commonly check to verify that statements foot and that numbers are expressed in multiple schedules are identical. You need to make sure that everything matches up. Under the new FERC system, this is really going to be automatic. Also, I know in preparing financial statements, you have to triple check between transcriptions between Excel and FERC's use of Visual FoxPro. I mean, Visual FoxPro hopefully will never have to worry about entering data or programming in Visual FoxPro again. But under the new system, that's totally unnecessary to do that continual cross-verification and checking, because the Excel spreadsheet, in essence, becomes the filing. And so, as such, that's going to ease your life tremendously. The third thing is, the implication for better text search for anyone who's using these financial statements, accountants, economists, attorneys. It's going to allow for much quicker research when filings are prepared or compared. You can compare your previous filings and your previous data historically within the same company, or again, as I mentioned before, you can compare comparable companies across different types of data sets, unbilled revenue, rate base, transmission miles, dollars spent per transmission mile in the electric area is one of my areas of focus and expertise. And ultimately, with the FERC filings published in Xbrl, it's going to make these searches and comparisons virtually automatic and instantaneous. So it's really going to change workflow tremendously. And one thing it's going to do for all of you accounting managers out there is going to make you much more valuable to your management, because you'll be able to come up with answers much quicker for your management. How are we doing comparing to how we did over the last 5 years? How are we doing in comparison to all of our peer companies, in our comparison group, in our ROE comparison group, which FERC uses to set returns on equity. So with utility and pipeline executives wanting to know their financial and operational performance, you're going to be able to provide that performance to your management on a very rapid basis. So I think this is going to be an extremely useful tool for you. I know it's going to be a useful tool for me and my consulting work that I do now, and it's something that I'm very excited about. So thank you, Virginia.
Yeah, thank you. And does anybody have any questions on the line? Feel free to unmute yourself, or if you're more comfortable in the chat, I'll read them off. Any questions for Jon? Even just about the transition in general. Oh, hi, Dean.
Yeah, there's just too many questions. So you were so it seems like you're highlighting the value of the reporting entities as to the value that's in the data for them, which is different than the value of the data, let's say, for FERC itself and its Office of Enforcement. Right,
exactly. I'm talking about the functionality of the data hub, and the reporting entities. There's a great value in having the platform and the ease of filing and utilizing, that Xbrl format and platform to report your data. But once it's in that format, that data then can all be extracted by the data hub, which it will be, into the data hub for all the companies. And then each one of these companies, in all the activities that they do, the rate cases they do, the financial reporting they may do to other entities, and other to their financial institutions, etc. All of that is going to become much more easy and transparent, given the facility that you'll have with this data that you really never had before. I mean, you had it, but you'd have to go dig it out, report by report, line item by line item, and put it into a separate Excel spreadsheet to actually utilize it. Now you'll be able to just extract it and create all kinds of reports and all kinds of analyses, on the fly, using the data hub that you'd never be able to do before.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions for anyone else, or Dean, if you have a follow-up, that'd be great too. That looks like. Yeah, just feel free to jump in.
So I guess the data before, I'm new to this market, but the data before was available through the FERC website. So are there highlights about why you think it's more value as Xbrl encoded data rather than as the data downloads from the FERC website as unstructured data?
Well, right, because the data downloads from the FERC website, again, you'd have to download the entire FERC Form 1, for example, and for an electric utility, and then you'd have to extract individually, the line item that you were interested in, and you'd have to do that for every single report individually, and then you'd have to import that into a separate spreadsheet to then manipulate it and utilize it. Now, with this data hub database functionality tool, ultimately, you can do that virtually all automatically now. You can do it, really in literally a matter of minutes, what would take you hours to do otherwise.
Okay, so you're highlighting the value of automating extraction.
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
Extraction and utilization, yes.
Yeah, no, Xbrl's definitely got advantages. I mean, when one thinks of a taxonomy, it's a classification system. So to be able to retrieve the data by classification rather than by spreadsheet location.
Yes. Yeah, you got it. Absolutely.
Okay. Great, thank you.
One of the other things we're looking at too is actually running calculations through the Xbrl data for certain key performance indicators, which is obviously a lot easier if those formulas are already baked into the Xbrl, or we can pull it from the Xbrl and then run them through our system.
Yeah, Dean, if you haven't seen the data hub demonstrated, you ought to get a demonstration of it.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, no, it would be good. I mean, there's so much advantages to working with standards like Xbrl. Yep. And so I'm really glad that FERC has adopted it, because standards are just going to, standards make markets, what I'd like to say, and it's going to allow for a competitive marketplace for creating value for FERC filers.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm glad you're so impressed with what they have.
I'll jump in. Chairman Wellinghoff, thanks again for being with our FERC professionals group today and for your perspective. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about, you were the longest serving chairman of the FERC, and so obviously you frequently had to ask FERC staff to come up with analyses of the industry drawn from the data that comes from the filings. I'm wondering if you could give us any thoughts on how you, as the executive of a large organization focused on these filings, how might you have managed differently, or what might you have done with your staff resources differently had the Xbrl data and a tool for analyzing it like the FERC Pro Data Hub, had those things been available when you were chairman?
Well, I certainly could have asked for a lot more than I asked for, because I know every time I made one of these requests of staff, I kind of got one of these looks like, oh my God, there's another week's worth of work. And if I had, in fact, if I had this kind of a tool, I probably wouldn't have asked my staff. I just would have pulled it up and done it myself, because I could have really literally done things in minutes that my staff took, several days or a week to do. And so that kind of facility, I think, is going to allow managers to become much more inquisitive of their staff about how the company's doing, where the company's going, how they compare to their fellow peers, and ultimately, again, the staff is going to provide those answers, is going to have much more value to me as an executive, because they're going to provide those answers quicker. They're going to provide those answers in much more depth, and they're going to provide them with much more certainty as well. Because the other issue is going through and extracting this data is always errors. There's always the issue of errors and error checking. And if you're doing it in a long and tedious process, there's no question that you're going to make multiple errors. Whereas if you've got, a automated system to extract the data and manipulate it and reformat it and utilize it to provide answers to you, you're going to have many fewer errors. So I'm going to have much more certainty as well in the data that I actually obtain from my staff.
And segueing I'll pause in case others have questions, but actually segueing from that, I've got one more, and then I'll go ahead. Sounds like Anand has a question.
Yes. So, Chairman, currently a certain set of forms are only being collected in XBRL. Do you see data from other reporting requirements like the EQR or ETR, the tariff reports? Are they matched with this set of data to understand something, some other patterns or some other KPIs by matching other sets of data other than the current set of forms?
Well, yes, I think that's ultimately going to be possible as we get more forms that are going to be required to be filed in this format that'll allow us to have a larger set of data overall. And I think a larger set of data in comparing the various types of forms that FERC requires is going to allow you to extract patterns that we've never been able to see before. So I think as Dean was talking about, setting standards is going to create a whole industry here of entities who are going to be able to start to develop these patterns and develop these this utilization of this data in ways that people haven't even thought about before. I think you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
And we'll hear a little bit about that, I think, from our next speaker. Robb Hudson is going to tell us a little bit about what to expect in terms of plans for other parts of the FERC's regulatory regime to be transformed from fillable PDF or web forms into the XBRL format. So we'll get to that in a little bit, I think. Chairman Wellinghoff, I've got one other question that has to do with maybe some advice for the people that are on this call. I see a lot of names that I recognize and a lot of people that are participating in this session this afternoon are FERC accountants. And so their job, or maybe the people that report to them, is occupied with some manual processes. They're taking information from Microsoft Excel and they are sometimes manually typing it into Microsoft Visual FoxPro. And so oftentimes they don't have time right now to go and look at their own filings after they have filed them or download the PDFs of peers or competitors' filings. And so this is not part of the job now, but perhaps the analysis could be going along with how you might have supervised differently as head of the FERC if this technology had been available. What would you recommend that FERC accountants who might have some of their time freed up, what are a couple of first steps that they might take in order to take better advantage of the data once it's available? Any recommended first steps for our audience?
Well, certainly I think they could probably sit down with their management and explain to them that this tool is available to them and explore how that data could be used. I mean, I think that would be my recommendation as the first step, is to be able to ensure that they're making full utilization of the opportunity of that data being there, because otherwise, certainly it is advantageous to be able to utilize this filing format, and it expedites and simplifies and ensures the data that's being filed is done in a correct and accurate fashion on the one side, but having the tool there to then extract that data and utilize it, I think that's something that management really should be aware of, and they should start thinking about ways to effectively utilize it to make their enterprise more competitive. That's what I would suggest.
I do think you're right, Chairman Wellinghoff. There are opportunities for the whole enterprise to be more competitive. For example, we showed the data to the head of investor relations for a large pipeline company this morning, and he was immediately interested. He doesn't have anything to do with filing the forms at all. His job is instead to build this company's relationship with, it's a public company, build its relationship with their investors that invest in their equity securities. But he quickly saw that this would be a tool that FERC filing data is now going to be much easier to grasp, and therefore that he can use that for competitive comparisons that are of interest to the investors. And that's a function that I hadn't even thought of.
Yeah.
It means, though, that some of our, go ahead, Chairman.
No, I think you're right. I think there are going to be multiple uses for this data now that it is accessible and it can be manipulated and reformatted and graphed in ways, display graphically in ways that would take many hours and in previous iterations to do, that there'll be new competitive uses for it that we haven't thought of. I think that's absolutely right. Investor relations is an absolutely, I think, an essential one, but I can think of many others.
Thank you. And I don't mean to monopolize, but excited to hear your perspective. Virginia, I'll turn it back to you to see if there are other questions or the transition.
Yeah. So if anyone else wants to jump in with a question, or like I said, if you prefer to use the chat box, that's totally fine. I'll read that off. Yeah, anybody else have any questions for Chairman Wellinghoff? Okay, well, I would definitely like to thank Chairman Wellinghoff for his time today. That was all really great information. And yeah, I think we're all excited about the possibilities. So thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you, Virginia. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay. So yeah. Let's turn it over to Robb Hudson, who's an industry analyst at the FERC and been doing a lot to lead this process of turning to XBRL filings for the FERC. Robb, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Robb Hudson. I've a little bit of background. I've been at FERC since June or July 2014, and I think by the end of that year is when this project was handed to me. So I've been at it from the beginning until now, and I'm still, I guess, the program office project manager for this. But we have a hand in a whole lot of parts of it, the IT structure and the policy side and all that stuff. Currently, I'm in the Division of Audits and Accounting within the Office of Enforcement at FERC. And before I get into some of the comment or the things that I'm going to talk about, I have to do the usual disclaimer that the chairman didn't have to do. But my disclaimer, I don't speak for any of the commissioners or the commission. All my opinions and things that I express here are my own. And so with that said, I'll jump into these three little bullets, and then we'll get to all your questions, because I like doing more of a conversation with anybody who can talk and things like that. So with FERC's expectation so right now the system is up and it is working. Most of the people that have been filing in it that I've noticed have been vendors making sure that their programs are working correctly. We released version 1.5 of the taxonomy, the validations, and the rendering code, which is how you make it into a human readable version as opposed to just the code that filers are sending in a couple months ago. And with that came some other major system improvements. And so we expect people to be able to file as soon as they get a working version on their desktop or online or however they're going to be filing it. They should be able to do it. The only thing that they'll need is they need to make sure that they also have a company identifier, a CID. And 99% of all of the filers that are submitting the Q3s will have a CID. They may not, the people who file the financial reports may not have used it before, but they are regulated in other ways where their company does have a CID. It's just getting in touch with the team here at FERC to track down who is the CID controller at the company. For lack of a better term, I'm sure that's not what they officially call it. So everything is up and working right now. It's the test filings they're completely validated. We just turned on a second set of validations to make sure the filings are XBRL valid, which is, so the system is built on the XBRL standard, which has its own rules for how things should be coded, how the order of things and how things should be identified, concepts should be used and things like that. Prior to this, we had not been running a validation. We were running a validation to make sure that they were coded correctly, but we weren't processing the errors and making them public for the filers who did that. We recently released a version of a later version of the system that also included those XBRL validations. These are honestly not things that filers will have to deal with. This is for vendors like HData who would be filing in the system, who would be talking with the system. Their program would be. So if you're an accountant on this call or something like that, you don't have to worry about that at all. Your HData will be, I'm sure, making sure all of the validations are visible to you and making sure that your errors are corrected even before they get in the door. And that's the benefit of this system, is that every single piece of it is public. We don't have any internal code except for, well, that web page that people submit their filings to, or what's called an API, which allows the computer program to submit the filings without having to save it and then upload it into a web page. But that's it. Everything else that FERC does to these filings is public. The taxonomy is public, all our validations are public, and the rendering code is even public. So if you want to see how it will display in eLibrary, that code, the exact code that we use, is available for vendors to incorporate into their programs. So moving on to the plans to publish the last decade. Right, so we are currently in the process of migrating prior year's data, 10 years prior to Q3, so Q2 2021, and 10 years before that. And we're running this through a complicated migration program, and we've made a lot of assumptions on the data, because converting Visual FoxPro data to XBRL data, to XBRL instance files, which is literally what we think had this program been up in 2014, yeah, that's in the window. Had this program been up in 2014, this is what that filing would have looked like when it was submitted. That is what we're trying to achieve. Unfortunately, it's a lot of data that, or not unfortunately, but the prior system had a lot of footnotes and data fields that were sent in the footnotes. Those are actually not going to be incorporated into the exact fields that they are now assigned to. But we are including all the footnotes and everything like that, so you can see them. This will give filers, vendors a good template to look at prior year's data, to work in the data hub. We expect all of this to go live in the fall of this year. My goal is to do it on the day that we flip the switch and allow official filings to come in on October 1st. I know that a lot of data will be done by then, but because we're trying to get the last quarter in also, we don't know if we'll get Q2 of 2021 added at that time. We're fairly sure we'll be able to get all the rest. So that'll be incorporated, and it's, as I said, it is our best guess. And one of the things, like, there weren't that many validations on the data. So when I say best guess, it's things like, we had sometimes years were only given in the last 2 digits. So like if there's a year on a contract that was reported or something like that, that said 50, we had to make a call, is that 1950 or 2050? And given if we looked at all these numbers, we could probably figure it out, but there's just too many filings for us to do it manually. So those type of things have been estimated, they've been guessed at. So transforming other FERC filings into XBRL into the future. So currently there is a process in the branch that I'm in within my division, within my office at FERC, to pursue looking at upgrading the EQR collection into an XBRL CSV collection. And when I say CSV, it's the XBRL standard has been adapted to CSV files, just as it was originally written for XML files, which is what we're using for these filings. But since that's time series data, the EQR, we are looking at CSV filing because it will preserve the option for filers to look at it in Excel on their desktops, and it would be much easier for them to submit. So that's kind of going concurrently. Right now, I think we've done 2 tech conferences that I've moderated, and we have a 3rd one coming up this fall. We're not talking about the technical side of moving to XBRL. We're talking about the fields and how they'd have to change moving into XBRL for the EQR. So from a technical standpoint and things like that, those questions are put off for probably when we get to more of a decision point within the commission to have those meetings. And I think that's kind of it. I mean, the groundwork for transforming other FERC filings, this obviously this is forms 1, 2, 6, 60, 714, all of their quarterlies and all of their non-major filings. So this large project will set the tone for how quickly and efficiently we can upgrade the other ones. And so we are doing our best to make it launch perfectly. There's bound to be some errors in the beginning just because it's a lot of code. So hopefully we'll be able to get through those and get them corrected as soon as possible. But I think we've done a really good job of getting a system out there that's working. If we're still tinkering around the edges to make sure it stays working all the time, just through some updates. We've had some unusual server problems and things like that, which have nothing to do with the code. And those will be ironed out probably within this week. So with that, I'll take any questions, any more topics, timelines or anything like that I can talk about, because everything that, honestly, that I know is public about this project at this point.
Great. So yeah, anyone feel free to jump in with questions for Rob.
Rob, this is Anand here. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Oh, thanks, Anand. This is Anna out at Kinder Morgan. I've got a question on, I guess, the horizon of implementing different forms. When you were talking, you said that this is kind of like the gateway, the starting point of getting other types of forms in XBRL format. Has there already been the groundwork laid for moving those other forms forward, or is that similar to the start of this project where we knew change was coming and then a decade later it finally got here?
I hope that what's left unsaid is, and please move them as fast as possible, as opposed to the opposite. I cannot comment on some of the current deliberations within FERC about some of the other forms, except for EQR. I mean, the electric quarterly reports, because that one right now is public. But I can tell you that we have a great new chief data officer who is working diligently with an amazing team of staff to upgrade internally and externally our data. And these type of upgrades go hand in hand with the plan that is in the Data Act for the Federal Data Act for federal agencies to be able to make this type of data much more accessible and transparent and easy to get to. So while I don't have anything, I'm not in a position to say what other offices are working on within there, but I do know that, you know, a lot of offices are watching to see how this works out, and with as few negative comments as we've gotten so far along the way, I think we're setting a really high standard with this project to be able to move hopefully quicker than I've been able to move this one. There's a lot of inertia in the beginning to get this off the ground. And also, honestly, I had been at the commission for 5 months and this landed in my lap. I'd come over from the Department of Commerce where I worked on national security export policy. And I mean, I'm an energy economist by education, but I was new to the data area. But we got this up to speed, and I think pretty good for being pretty much the third agency to move to a structured data collection. I think this is good. I think the next ones will be much quicker when they do come.
Great. Thanks, Anna, for the question.
Okay. Rob, this is Anand from Iris. I just wanted to check with you. Now, we talked about validations once you receive the filing from the different vendors out there. So there are validations embedded in the XBRL as we talked about it, some business rules which are included in the taxonomy. Are there any other rule sets that you are processing and checking other than what is there in the taxonomy and what is there in the XBRL standard?
No, there's absolutely nothing that's within like a black box at FERC that we run on the files. I mean, different offices, that would prevent a filing from coming in the door. Different offices will then, run their own screens and analyses and things like this on this data. But there is no unknown rule or PDF that someone would have to read or Word document that describes how to write, some sort of validation. All of the validation codes are in the validations file that's on the website. And at some point, we hope to move that to the collections portal so it could also be downloaded and incorporated on a version by version basis, just like the taxonomy is.
Okay.
And so we're working on that. That might be something that is pushed off until next summer. But for now, we just keep the rule set on the website along with the validation code because it's at least relatively easy to get to. I make all the usual apologies for FERC's website. But yeah, there's nothing that we're doing to the files that would prevent them from coming in the door that isn't known within the taxonomy or within the rule sets.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Watching over here to see if anyone hops off mute. Like I said, feel free to chat in as well.
I've got one to jump in on. Rob, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and for helping us understand how implementation of this requirement is going to go and what to expect in this critical time. It is a critical time. This is, as you mentioned, October 1st is the turning on of the switch around October 1st for official filings to actually be filed and submitted in XBRL with that deadline on December 31st. When you started off on this journey, in I think 2015, you probably had expectations of how it was going to work. What is shaping up meeting your expectations and what is shaping up different from your expectations?
That's an interesting question. I think once we got past, so when we began this project, it was actually based in a custom XML format. The original notice or order from the commission was to upgrade these forms into a custom XML format. And the more being very new to data collections and everything and just trying to get my hands around this project, the more I read about this and standards and talked to other groups and other organizations that had gone through, or agencies, that had gone through large upgrades of their most important forms, to be quite honest, they looked at standards. And so once we got past the education point, not only internal, but external about XBRL, about how it's historically been used mostly for accounting, but it is a business reporting language, and it is possible to and very easy to collect the operations data from these forms in XBRL. Once we got past that, and we assured people that there would be a robust marketplace of vendors who would come in to fill the void when we were getting rid of our software, the Visual FoxPro software, which I'm very pleased that vendors like HData have stepped in and stepped up to provide their services. It's been relatively quickly. There's been, of course, the internal agency discussions about how to do things and how to do them properly and things like that. But there hasn't been much unexpected process-wise that we've run into. Except, I will say, one of the good unexpected things was when we put out the notice of proposed rulemaking, we didn't receive one negative comment about moving to XBRL. And I think that's a credit to FERC and the team and the way that we structured this with the outreach that we did ahead of time to educate people about what would happen and why that this would be in time an easier adoption or an easier way to submit data. Yes, the first year will be much more difficult, learning new software, trying to figure out how things get in. And of course, FERC understands that too. And internally, we're prepared to talk about extensions and everything like that as necessary. But I think we did a very good job of educating our filers from each industry. And I still have conference calls with each one of the large associations 2 or 3 times a year to do just like this, to talk to them about things. So what is unexpected is just like, the way, actually, to reference back several years ago, Hudson, when you were still at the Data Coalition, I went to one of the conferences, and I forget who was speaking. It was a woman who ran one of the agencies, and she talked about how if federal agencies or the federal government were treated like businesses, the data that we collect is our greatest asset. And being able to free that data, for lack of a better word, or monetize it, would enable so many more technologies to build off of it. And she cited an example of Pokemon Go using the weather information from NOAA. And I thought that was fascinating. And so that's what I'm hoping that we see is a video game that uses some of this FERC data. No, is some sort of application of this FERC data. I mean, that we don't even imagine could happen at this point in the game. So people ask me where I see this going and things like that. I don't see a limit in where I see it going, I think is more the question. I began a lot of this process saying, I can tell you, internally, I'm going to say yes to everything you ask me if we can do, because everything is possible once we get good data in the door. But it just depends on how much money you want to spend. And that's kind of it with technology and data is do you want to put in the work to get this right? And we put in a lot of work, I think, to get this right. We could put in more work to get it better, of course, on every step of the way. We have more plans to enhance this, the notification process and bring in some more comments and hopefully start some sort of like bi-yearly or not bi-yearly, semi-annual or quarterly group of people to advise on how things could change, starting once we get a couple of quarters in. But that's what I want to see, and that's the surprise that I want to see, is that someone's used this data in a way that we had no idea it could be used. And I think that is part of the benefits of being able to do this in government, is to be able to make these connections so businesses can thrive.
That's a great jumping off point for another question, Rob, about what our audience should do. As you know, the people that participate in the FERC Professionals group, for the most part, they're busy with the transition. They're going to be doing the reports. They'll be creating them using FERC Pro, or maybe using another tool, but probably using FERC Pro. What would you like? And of course, there are many formal avenues to engage with the FERC. You mentioned the public comment period. Those things are, of course, open. Who's got time to do those? I sure don't, although I probably should. What are some of the informal ways in which you'd like to see maybe the people on this conversation brainstorm or ideate on ways to use this data? Any suggestions for the people that are listening in?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I'm available at any time for anybody to have a conversation about this. Essentially, and so it's very easy to get my attention to have me talk to things. I have to get it cleared, of course, and things like that. So I'm happy to have conversations with groups, with filers, with vendors, with all of them about at any time in person, on a video call. Hopefully when we get back in the office, if you want to make a lovely trip to Washington, D.C., that would be great too. Other ways that we're doing, as I said, I have back of the envelope plans to create some sort of focus group or technical group to talk about things that could be improved in the code. We haven't launched it, and it's really just an idea. It's just a way to have ongoing conversations with different users and filers of this data, vendors, the actual regulated entities, and then of course we'd love to have a users group of people who use the data. And I don't have any information about how we would set that up yet, but it is something that I am interested to do. In the meantime, though, we have an email address that I check regularly. In fact, it dings my desktop with any information. It's Xbrl forms refresh at ferc.gov, all spelled out, no dots or periods. And you can always reach me at robert.hudson@ferc.gov too for any of this information. Right now, those are the ways to do it, is to get it to me directly. If HData, Hudson, if you all plan to continue have your own focus groups, we could have bi-monthly meetings or quarterly meetings as they go. I don't see a problem with that for you to get together your customers' insights and things like that. We would love that because I want to continuously work on this along with all the other things that I'm doing at FERC. This has been the majority of things, but this is, for those that haven't worked in a federal agency, the last thing that's kind of looked at is data and how to do things. It's usually done in the CIO's office. So this is a different model for us to have program office people like myself really deep in the mix of upgrading information that's important to us. And so anything that is done with this data once it's released is great to hear about because it justifies us doing more of it. Any studies that's done on it particularly helps us justify spending more FTEs and money on assigning people to projects to make this data better available because it's what the country wants. So.
That's great to hear. Definitely.
Yeah, I have 4 questions, Virginia. If there's nobody else there with questions, I'm ready to shoot them. Rob, we're not going to let you go that easily. Anybody else out there, Virginia, with questions?
Yeah, anyone can feel free to jump in. Yeah, go ahead, Anand.
Okay, Rob, I've got about 2-3 questions. One is you talked about conversion of 10-year data. How many years data are you going to be made available in the platform? Is it that as additional years come in, you're going to drop off 1 year at the end of it, at the back of it? That means only 10 years of data is going to be available. That is question number 1. Second is, how often do you see taxonomies changing? Will older versions still be applicable for amendments and restatements for that matter? My third question to follow up on that is, once a company files an amendment, what happens to the previous file? Is that still available in the public space, or is that deactivated and only the active file is retained? Probably those are the 3 questions I have at the moment.
Sure. Okay. So about the data migration, we hope to publish all 10 years on October 1st. I have a meeting later today to see what can be seen by everybody. I do know that each company will be able to see. Our goal is to have each company be able to see all 10 years of their filings on October 1st. We have made some upgrades, and I need to see if they're working to make sure that all of that information is put into the into the area where you don't need a log on to get to see the data. So that's public. I just need to, we just need to do a little bit more UAT on that. So that's the goal, is to have it all available, all the migration and all of the accepted filings. So I'm going to skip to the second one, and then we'll talk about old taxonomies in a third. So in that portal, in the view, the table view that you'll be able to see, the public can see and the filers can see, the public should be able to see all accepted filings in perpetuity. So if it was accepted and got in the door, you should be able to see, click on it, see it, download the rendering, download the instance file, and take a look at it. Open it up in a viewer that you have, import it into a database, anything like that. Refilings will not replace anything. It's just another line on the table, for lack of a better word. It's the next one. It's just, we've filed an update to this. It's here. The public will still see the old one. They'll see the new one. They'll be able to keep them both, replace them. It all depends on what you want to do in your system. It's important for FERC to be able to analyze what's changed. So our database will keep everything at all times. I think it would probably be interesting to see from the public's point of view what filings have been refiled too. So we don't expect anything like that. I do know that, and for an individual filer, they will have a view into all of their filings, the ones that didn't work and the ones that did work, the test filings and things like that. Those will be there in perpetuity also. I mean, if it doesn't get in the door, you get the error log and things like that, but it's going to line up on that same screen that is your filing. It won't be the public filing. So you'll be able to see all that, the errors forever, and your test filings to make sure that they're right. But I'm sure that all the filings will be valid once they come through the door, because all of our code is public. So it should be a cinch to implement that. And back to the old taxonomy. So we are planning to keep taxonomies forever. So if in 2082, ABC Corp needs to come back and file their 2024 filing, they'll be able to just reference the 2024 taxonomy and submit it. In fact, they will be required to reference the 2024 taxonomy and submit it in that way. Currently, we wouldn't accept a past filing in a future taxonomy, if that makes sense. So you couldn't come in like 2025 and use the 2020, and refile in 2022 according to the 2025 taxonomy. You'd have to use the taxonomy for the filing that it is in, that the year and quarter it is. And that's a function of our system. We don't plan to do any taxonomy updates between now and January 1st. We think the taxonomy is well baked. There possibly could be some rule changes and some rendering changes based on some feedback that we've gotten from vendors about some stress tests and things like that. But those wouldn't change any of the filing procedures that regulated entity would have to do. It's just things on the back end, deeper things that we didn't expect. And so we may do one of those if there are errors that rise to the level of needing to submit something like that. There will be a taxonomy update next year, because we're not going to get this 100% right in Q3. We're going to get it 99% right, but we do want to make some changes. In fact, there are some fields that are in the taxonomy that are only used for purposes of migrating the data, and we'll want to remove them. So I cannot say that the commission will approve a taxonomy change in January, but I can say that that for those reasons, it's more than likely that it would be a good idea to publish a taxonomy in January prior to the annual filing, which will be the big one that's most important to everybody.
Okay. One last question is, sorry, I have too many. Outputs, so when you download a filing, would you give different formats, or is only going to be XBRL files? Would I be able to download an Excel download of the same file, or a PDF, or is it just going to be XBRL?
So the screen that one would get to, whether it's a filer or someone viewing from the outside, will display the instance document, which is the submission document. And they'll be able to download that. We are also making a human readable version in HTML. It's actually inline HTML, but we're not providing an inline HTML reader, but it is formatted for inline HTML on that same page. So you can see a human readable version, and you can download the exact instance file that we incorporate internally into our database. That HTML instance file is, at the end of it being submitted, will be pushed into eLibrary, but it's my assumption that people won't be going to eLibrary very much for these anymore. Not out of any, just because it'll probably be easier to find it in this system. And it's nice to be able to hover over fields and things like that and see where they come from, what their field name is when you're in an inline viewer, and how they're related to other things. We don't have plans to support any other downloads or filing formats at this time, because we're providing we're providing the entire file, the actual file that comes in the door. And if filers, vendors, or academics or the public want to recreate our database, they have what we're doing to recreate our database. We don't want to have to support at this time some sort of robust, querying, spreadsheet producing type of data hub, for lack of a better word, at FERC to download this information or look at it. We just want to provide the data.
Understand. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so we are a little bit over time here. So thanks everybody for staying on, and thank you, Rob, for all the information. This has been really great. So glad that this session went so well. So thanks again for your time and expertise.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this. And again, contact me if you need anything at all. I'm happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. So just a quick wrap up here on some dates. We are setting this monthly, that first Wednesday here. So the next one will be July 7th. And we're really looking forward to it, especially because this one went so well. And our data hub will be ready in July 2021 as well, as will the test XBRL filings for the FERC. So from the July to September, you can do that test filing, get a feel for the system you're using, and make sure everything's going to go smoothly for that December filing of Q3. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me or anyone else with any questions you have about anything we went over today. But yeah, thanks so much for a great session. And thanks to our speakers again.